Much later, the Supreme Court took the view that you cannot have the fundamental rights in silos, and they are all interlinked. And that, I think, is the correct legal position also. For example, take the right to protest. If you want to protest, how do you protest? I mean, it has to be through speech. That is one way of protesting. It has to be through an expression of your opinion. So you cannot say that, well, you can protest, but you can't speak or you can't express yourself. It doesn't work like that. Similarly, if I want to carry out a particular profession, if I want to be a lawyer, for example, I should have the right to speak whatever I want to speak in court. So all these fundamental rights that we have are all interlinked with one another. That has been the position now for several years, and I think that is going to continue for the next several years also. Now, with this sort of a background, if you look at the right to protest, if I want to protest against something and somebody silences me, I can be silenced in a variety of ways. One is something which has been happening in the recent past, where persons have been detained for violating the Section 144 orders and protesting when you're not allowed to protest over there. Another way of preventing a protest is by saying that, well, if you protest and if that protest becomes violent, we're going to arrest you or we're going to demolish your house, bulldozer justice as it is called. So these are ways and means of preventing protests. Now similarly, there are ways and means of protesting the fundamental right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Now when you talk about freedom of expression, you don't necessarily talk about speech. You can express yourself in a variety of ways, like I said, through a protest. You can express yourself. You can express yourself by maintaining silence. There has been, if you remember, a couple of years ago, there was a pretty powerful message that had been sent across by some young lady on social media, where she did not speak a word, but she just had these placards which contained messages. So that was a form of expression, that was a form of speech. Now, I think that in the recent past, we've had this assault on the freedom of speech and expression in a variety of ways. One of the most egregious ways in which this was carried out was when Siddique Kapil was arrested. Now, what did he propose to do? He wanted to go and write a story about something. All right? And they arrested him and not only kept him in jail for 2 years, but I think the treatment that was meted out to him was inhuman, in the sense that his mother was dying, right? He was not allowed to meet her, and ultimately she passed away without his having met her. I think probably he met her for a short while. So you have this way of suppressing that journalist. Arrest is one thing. Okay, so one way of suppressing him was arresting him, that is one. The other way was by, in a sense, torturing him in prison, by not allowing him to meet his mother who was on her deathbed. These are ways in which the freedom of speech and expression can be suppressed. We also have a similar kind of a situation, not a question of freedom of speech and expression, But what happened to Father Stan Swami, right? I mean, can you imagine a person had to go to the court for the purpose of getting a sipper so that he could drink water? So these are ways in which, a person's integrity, his freedom can be taken away. Now, what has been happening now in the recent past, and Prabir is also one of the victims of that, is that apart from the arrest, persons who are associated with that person who is being targeted, they are also becoming victims of this state action. Not only are they becoming victims of state action, but some of their personal belongings are being taken which are intimately tied to their profession. We've heard about cell phones being taken, we've heard about laptops being taken, not being released. Now today, it's very difficult for anybody, let alone a journalist, it's very difficult for anybody to work without a laptop or without a mobile phone. But once that is taken away, not only is the right to privacy being destroyed, because the cell phone contains private data, the laptop contains private data, but the person is in fact prevented from carrying out his profession. So another right, another fundamental right, the right to carry out your profession, is being taken away. So there is this intermixing of all these rights. Of course, freedom of speech and expression, I would take that as the first and the most important right. Others perhaps flow from it in some form or the other. Another manner in which I find that the freedom of speech and expression is being controlled is not only through arrest, but through the pressure that is put upon journalists or that is put upon the owners of newspapers by denying them advertisements which the government gives. I have come across one or two persons who have mentioned to me that if they had written some particular article which was not very much liked by the establishment at that point of time, suddenly newspaper advertisements, it was a small newspaper, the advertisements stopped coming, and they had to somehow or the other, convey to the establishment that, listen, what we have done was wrong, it was a mistake, so that we could start functioning again. I think Anuradha Bhasin was probably one of those who was a victim of this sort of harassment or this sort of a suppression of the freedom of speech and expression. So that is another way of doing it. Another way that has been happening again in the recent past is getting hold of Twitter. You tell Twitter that, listen, I want a particular tweet to be taken off. Or you tell YouTube that I want a particular video to be taken off. Or control it somehow or the other. Now the idea of controlling it is again a violation of the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. You can say things that only the establishment wants to hear. If the establishment doesn't want you to say something, well, they have ways and means of controlling it. Like I said, stopping advertisements if it's in the print media, telling YouTube that you take down those videos, telling Twitter that you somehow or the other delete those tweets and only put tweets that we want you to put. Now, all these, are ways and means of curbing the freedom of speech and expression. One of the more dangerous ways that I find is now gaining prominence is that of the use of the law of defamation, criminal defamation. You write something which is innocuous, somebody can misinterpret it and say that, well, it is defamatory, right? And a case is filed against that person. It could be in any part of the country because the law says that defamation is when it is published. And if it is published in different parts of the country, somebody or the other can file a case against you in that part of the country. And there have been instances where journalists, somebody from Tripura, for example, a journalist from Tripura, he had to face criminal proceedings in Maharashtra, the other end of the country. There have been instances of some journalists being asked to attend courts in 10 or 15 different parts of the country, 10 or 15 different states, to handle 10 or 15 different cases. So that is, I think, something which is gaining prominence, the use of the law of defamation. And unfortunately, because it's a matter that comes to court, somebody has to be extra careful that you can't, take the court for granted. You have to attend the court when the court summons you. If you don't attend court, you're likely to get arrested, which makes it even worse. So these are several ways of, methods of curtailing the freedom of speech and expression, which I'm finding is happening today on a pretty routine sort of a basis. One thing that I would like to say is that everybody has the fundamental right to remain silent. Now that, I'm afraid, is a right which is not being exercised by persons who are taken into custody. The law says, the Constitution says, that you have a right to be silent, which means that if the police ask you a question, you have a right to say that, listen, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer that question. What happens in a situation like that? In a situation like that, the court says, the police says, and they tell the court every now and then, it has happened even yesterday, they tell the court that the witness is not cooperating or the accused is not cooperating. And because the accused is not cooperating, therefore bail should not be granted, or that the person should be remanded into custody. But that, in my view, is a clear violation of Article 20 of the Constitution, where you have a right to remain silent. I would urge, I hope none of you get arrested or get caught by the police, but please remember, you have a right to be silent. If the police ask you a question, say, sorry, I don't want to answer that question. Because what you say can be used against you. The police can't use it in evidence against you. That the law does not permit, the Evidence Act does not permit that. But that can be the basis for further investigations of a future course of action. But an authority like the Enforcement Directorate, for example, can use that, whatever you say can be used against you. So again, now because this right is being taken away, a right which is guaranteed by the Constitution, the right to remain silent, is being taken away, that again is a way of expressing your protest or your disagreement with the manner in which the law is being advanced or is being used against a person. So there are a variety of ways, I believe, which are being used today to curb the freedom of speech and expression. Well, the problem is that if you try to protest, you are in trouble. So the result is that the media is told, the press is told, that you toe the line that we want you to toe. And that's where the expression "go the media" comes in. But we need persons who are in a position to protest. We need persons who are in a position to dissent. The Supreme Court has very often dissented. There are judges who have dissented in important cases, even recently. So dissent is not something which is anti-national, as somebody said, or against the sovereignty and integrity of India. It is something which is accepted, which is something which is tolerated. And I would urge all of you that where there is a point which has to be made, please make it. Otherwise, you will get only one side of the picture. You will not get the other side of the picture. There are cases and cases that I have dealt with, and I'm sure lawyers and judges have dealt with, where you listen to one side, you come to a particular conclusion. But you will come to the right conclusion only after you hear the other side. That's what natural justice requires. So really, just because the media is being told, social media is being told, the print media is being told, the audiovisual media, TV, television is being told that you propagate a particular point of view is not necessarily correct. Unless we have a different point of view, it may not be the opposite point of view, but unless we have a different point of view, all of us are going to suffer, because we'll all be taking perhaps one-sided decisions, and if not, if it doesn't stop, perhaps the wrong decisions. That's all that I would like to say. Thank you very much.